Hi everyone, it's Stella Grizont from WUPA, and I'm so excited to bring you a very special guest. I would say we're bringing her back. It's been like 3 years, and we both had babies since then. I had Lenore. She's giving birth to this book, which is so amazing. I can't wait to tell you guys about it. But Vanessa Van Edwards is our special guest today, and in case you don't remember her, she is like the expert on body language, cracking the human code, helping us understand our complexities and how to not be boring and how to be human lie detectors. I mean, all the stuff. Like, I want to have you as a dinner guest, because I feel like we would have the best party, and you would have like endless awesome stories. So anyway, and just in case you're not familiar with Vanessa, she's been on NPR. She's written multiple books at this point. She's been on CNN. She's constantly being asked to talk about her understanding of human behavior and how to really hack body language and just really understand what it means to be human. So I thought she would be amazing to bring on, because we're constantly dealing with questions of how to lead a happier life, how to find work that's fulfilling, how to be better humans. And so I'm so grateful for your new book, Captivate, which you guys can buy very soon. When can they buy it?
April 25th is the big birthday, the birthday of the book.
April 25th. So, all right, well, without further ado, let's get into this. So first of all, I couldn't believe this, because my first experience with you was just like, talking about all this exciting stuff, but you claim to have been a socially awkward, boring person. So how is that possible?
Okay, so yes, I am a recovering awkward person, and I think that I used to say I used to be boring, and my worst day I still am boring. And what I mean by that when I say that is that I think that all of us, when we have fears, and that can be social fears, fears of being rejected, fears of being criticized, fears of being not remembered, we have different defaults, right? So some people in fear get overly dramatic and they have to be the center of attention. Some people get narcissistic and see everyone as beneath them. When I got fearful, when I still get fearful, I retreat. So I shut down. I feel like everything I'm going to say is going to be uninteresting. And so I say nothing at all. And so what happened was, in my interactions, is that instead of asking questions or responding with stories, I was like, I don't want to say anything that people aren't going to like, because I was very worried about being liked. And so I said nothing at all, or said nothing of interest. So in a way, I think that boring was my comfort zone, because it felt safer.
Yeah. And so what inspired you tell us about Captivate and what inspired you to write this, because it sounds like you've lived this journey. It's not just like when that in the 80s, that hair club for men commercial, it's like, I'm not just the president, like
Yeah.
you really embodied this yourself, this all the stuff you learned. So tell us like a little bit about that and what's in this book.
Yeah. So when I was growing up, I think that people thought of people skills in two different ways. One, it was sort of an afterthought. Parents, teachers would sort of say, oh, she'll pick it up, just be nice to the other kids at recess. They'd kind of give you these pleasantries that were okay, but they weren't very helpful. Like, be yourself. What does that mean, right? Like, if you're uncomfortable with yourself, how can you be yourself, right? Like that didn't help me growing up. Or be authentic. Like, what does that even mean? So that was one aspect. The other aspect was, you read all these people skills books, and some of them have really helped me, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, why Men Don't Listen and Why Women Can't Read Maps, like very, very good books. But I found that they were written by natural extroverts, by people who had a natural knack for people and were trying to break down their natural ability for other people. Well, as a non-extrovert, as someone who does not feel like people comes naturally, I wasn't so fast on the pickup. Like, they would have like these titles of chapters that were like, be interested to be interesting. And I was like, I liked the idea of it, but like I had no idea what that actually meant. And so I started to look at this work and learn from these natural extroverts, but I tried to break it down into specific science, formulas, blueprints. Was there any academic research on some of these ideas or principles, which made me feel like, okay, they're really worth going through the effort of trying them, and breaking them down to these formulas. And so basically Captivate was up, I had like 6 or 7 notebooks that I would like keep on the corner of my desk. And I synthesized them down into this book. It was like the book that I wished someone had given me in school as like, this is the complement to all the academic skills you're learning. This is the people skills to that. That makes sense.
One of the things that you mentioned in your book, and this really stood out to me, was, speaking of all these sayings, we often hear, fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And you address that head on. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I know that a lot of well-meaning researchers, well-meaning experts, a lot of extroverts use this phrase, I've noticed, fake it till you make it. And I understand the feeling behind it, right? It's like, oh, if you act confident, you will then feel confident. The problem with this is if you're not naturally an extrovert, or you do have a lot of fear going into interactions, or you feel really awkward trying to make small talk, it is very hard for us to actually catch up. So what happens is you end up faking it and it comes across as inauthentic. And I think that when we're talking about authenticity, which is a word that we throw around all the time, I had to break that down a little bit more. Inauthentic is when someone's words do not align with their body. So it's when the verbal is out of alignment with nonverbal. So for example, you see this a lot in job interviews or on dates where someone thinks about the perfect thing to say. Right? They have like a great story they're going to tell on a date, or they rehearse the perfect answer for their recruiter, for their interviewer. And they get into the room and they're like, right, deliver that answer. And they have it perfectly memorized and scripted. But the problem is they're actually feeling insanely nervous. They have terrible imposter syndrome. They have no confidence at being in the room. And so even though their words are saying one thing, their facial expressions, their body language, their hand gestures are saying another. And so the interviewer or the date or the person who's listening to your elevator pitch, they kind of feel like there's something off here and they don't know what it is. And so that's why you end up having an interview that you think went really well, but you get a no. Or you give a pitch to a client that you think went really well and they call back 3 weeks later with no, sorry, no thanks. Or you go on a date with someone and they're like, I don't think I want a 3rd or 4th date. Yeah. I think that's why that happens. It isn't like a massive deal breaker or you didn't do anything wrong. It picked up on the fact that you were trying to deliver something that wasn't actually there.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for people to not, what's the opposite of faking it till you make it? Like, especially if you're nervous, how do you prepare and then be authentic?
Yeah. So I think that actually the biggest antidote to fear is control. So for recovering awkward people like myself, for my ambiverts or my introverts out there. So I actually think I'm an ambivert. Most people are. We do research in our lab on extroversion, and we found that 82% of people are actually ambiverts, which means that they are situational extroverts. So there are some situations where they feel like they can be talkative and outgoing, but there are other situations where they're like more reserved, more of an observer, more inhibited. And so you can flip into that. Most people are that, but we never hear about that, right? Yeah. And so like for me, for example, I have found after much careful observation, this is my recommendation to everyone listening, is to figure out where do you thrive and where do you survive? So who are the people, what are the places, and what are the topics that make you feel like you're your best self? And what are the places, who are the people, what are the topics that make you feel like your worst self? So for example, I noticed that I would have like intense anxiety / hide in the corner whenever I went to loud bars, nightclubs, and like concerts. And so like, most people our age, I think like that's the thing, like that's what you want to do on Saturday night. And I was just like, I would dread it. And it would be for like friends' birthday parties or things like that. And I realized that's because my ambiversion flips into introversion when I can't have deep conversations. Like my way of interacting with people is like really interesting conversation starters and having aha moments and asking about what they're learning. You can't do that in a loud bar. You're like, what's your name? You know what I mean? Like, oh, like it just like, it kills me. So I learned that bringing more control into my social calendar actually helped me be not only a better person, but also have a lot less fear about it. So I started saying no to events like that. And usually I would add a yes. So like I would say, Christina, I'm so excited about your birthday. I know that the club entrance is at 10. I was wondering, can I take you out for dinner beforehand so you have a nice meal in your tummy before you go get really drunk at the nightclub?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And she'd be like, yeah, of course. And so we go to dinner nearby. And I'd be like, bye, have
fun. Yeah. I love that. And I'm exactly the same way. And I know there might be people who, my husband, for example, is the opposite. He's like extreme extrovert, loves lots of people around. I'm like, retreating. So speaking of, one of the reasons why I also don't like networking events is because I do feel like there's a lot of small talk.
Mm-hmm.
And you give really great advice for how to have real talk and not small talk. Can you share some of those tips? Because I know a lot of people watching are probably, actively networking, whether it's just to grow professionally or get a new job or whatever, build their business. So what suggestion do you have for making the most out of those events?
Yeah, so networking is actually important because it spans not just networking events. It can happen next to the person on a plane, right? Like you happen to sit next to like the ideal client on a plane, or it can happen at a friend's birthday party where you realize, wow, like I should talk about my business with this person, right? So networking happens a lot of different places. So networking for me was actually the third category, the neutral category. So I noticed that it wasn't thrive. I wasn't like, yeah, another networking event, but I didn't dread them. So I realized that the difference was that there were certain events where I was like, wow, that was so worth my time, or that was so great. Whereas other nights I'd be like, why did I do that? Why did I go to this event? And the biggest difference was exactly what you mentioned, was the nights where I had big talk, I call it big talk, were the nights where I was like, I am so glad I went. I'm so glad I met that person, versus the nights I had small talk. So small talk is characterized by a lack of brain activity, or a lack of chemical activity. So, and that sounds crazy, but yeah. It's kind of like if you think of a conversation in terms of like a chart, small talk is like right, like there's no dips, there's no highs. It's safe, right? There's no dips, but there's also no peaks. So big talk is when you try to stimulate dopamine, and dopamine is the chemical of pleasure. It's the chemical of rewards. And so we can trigger dopamine beyond just saying, I have a gift for you. It's a great pen. We love getting gifts. But you can also do it verbally by giving like verbal gifts. So the easiest way to do this is to get someone out of social scripts. You do not want to ask the questions that people have answered a million times before. For the brain, it's like going to sleep. It's like going on autopilot. The biggest one is, what do you do? Can I dig into a little bit of that question for a second?
Yes.
Okay. So I was thinking about this the other day, actually, and I wrote about what do you do in my book, but I didn't talk about this aspect because I was thinking about it while I was at a networking event. Someone said to me, Vanessa, I know that you teach to not ask what do you do. But if I'm at a networking event and I want to talk about my business, like I want to pitch someone and they're in all personal land talking about their family and their kids, how do I transition into professionalism? Like, don't I have to ask that question? And what I realized is you can learn a lot about a person if they want to answer that question. So I've noticed there are people where you don't ask that question and it's like they are studiously avoiding it. For whatever reason, it's like they're either ashamed of what they do, or they think it's boring, or they really don't want to talk about it because they had a bad day. They will do anything possible to avoid that question. That teaches you a lot about that person, right? Like that teaches you that there's something more that they want out of life, that maybe they're thinking about a second career, that maybe they are unhappy and are looking for a transition. Those are much better questions, like working on any personal passions. When you're not at your day job, what do you do? right? Like asking questions like that. Oh God, that's going to get them like, oh, phew, I'm not going to have to talk about that. On the other hand, if you don't ask what do you do and someone wants to tell you, they will find a way to tell you.
Yeah, totally.
They will find a way. Like, for example, I live in Portland, Oregon, and it's kind of a running joke that if people work at Nike, they'll always tell you they work at Nike. And like the reason for that is because Nike in Portland, it's like a very prestigious company. It's really cool to work for. And so like, you know, the running joke is like, how do you know if someone works at Nike? They tell you in the first minute. And that tells you a lot too, right? So like I could be talking about, hey, this restaurant is great. Have you been here before? You know, or do you have any favorite restaurants in the neighborhood? Both very dopamine producing questions. And they'll be like, yeah, I love the restaurant down the street. I went there for my Nike offsite 2 weeks ago. Right. And that tells you a lot about a person too, right? Because that means they have a lot of pride around their job. So then it more opens you up to explore working on any projects, right? So not what do you do? Working on anything exciting at Nike, right? Like those kinds of questions as opposed to the typical ones we hear all the time.
Yeah, I love that. So really to ask, I mean, it's interesting. So to play, it's kind of like doing Kung Fu or whatever that martial art is where you're kind of working with the energy and the resistance. It's like, they don't want to talk about it. Cool. So what's like the positive, what's exciting in your life, right? Or they
isn't that Tai Chi? Is that Tai Chi? No.
Tai Chi. I don't know.
No, wait.
There's a martial art that like you work with your opponent's force or strength.
I'm writing it down. I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna find it later.
Good, because I always use this analogy and I never know the right martial art that I'm talking about. So that would be
okay. I'm gonna email you because it's such a good metaphor.
Yeah. It is, yeah. Like you're working with it, and then what I love is to ask like questions that really go towards this person's what's energizing for this person. So, and you named some other ones like, you know, what are you looking forward to, or, you know, some highlights from your weekend. Just that I love those questions, and that really helps.
Yeah, and if it's helpful in the book, I kind of, you know, there's ones that take a little more courage than others, and I totally get it, right? Like, so on my best day, like in the environments where I feel really comfortable, I will ask my more courageous questions, right? Like my more courageous questions might be like, you know, if you could give a TED Talk on a topic that you're not an expert in, what TED Talk would you give? You know? Yeah. So like that's a courageous question. I can only do it on my best day, and that's okay, right? And then I have like back pocket questions. And back pocket questions I can ask anywhere, anytime, and I'm comfortable with them. So like, have anything fun coming up this weekend? That's a safe question, you know, but it's not a really typical one because every weekend is different. So like that's safe. Or like, gone on any vacations this holiday season, you know, like that's kind of a safe one. So back pocket versus courageous, and you kind of pick which ones you like.
You guys see why I want to like have dinner with Vanessa. It's too bad you're opposite post.
My dinner parties are fun. If you ever come to Portland, you can come. I want you to come to my house. We can have dinner.
My best friend lives in Portland, so I'll have to make it out.
And I can meet Lenore.
Yeah. So, okay. So, all right. So we talked about small talk. We talked about big talk. So part of that is all about, you know, in those moments, you're making kind of a first impression, and you have some really amazing tips for first impressions. And what I loved about your book, oh, there it is. Good, I didn't have the actual, look at that gorgeous picture. Yes.
It's my blue steel.
I actually chose that picture in her newsletter, in Vanessa's newsletter. You asked everyone to like pick a picture, and that's the one I ended up choosing. So,
yay!
You guys should all join Vanessa's newsletter because she gives the best. You give great email.
Thank you. I love those emails. And also, so I crowdsourced the cover, as Stella just mentioned. I crowdsourced the cover where we asked people like which their favorites were. So Stella, thank you for your vote. That was good. But I was turning to the page of first impressions. I had it bookmarked for you.
Okay, good. So do tell.
So one thing that I really struggled with first impressions, this was a really big one for me personally, because the most anxiety fraught time, fraught time for me was those first few seconds, especially because then I read all this science about how the first few seconds are all that matters. So then I got even more nervous. I was like, oh, I have to really make them work. And so I broke it down into like, what is happening in that first impression? So what I realized, there's kind of 3 levels, and we pass through these 3 levels. Either we pass through them and we level up a relationship. So we go from cold contact to warm contact, or, casual dating to like a serious date, right? That's what kind of dictates these. So the first one is, are you friend or foe? This is a real instinct level, like lizard brain, right? Am I safe with this person? Usually we pass through that one pretty quickly, especially in business environments, because context, we're with someone, we can see that they're visible, they're angling towards us, they don't make our kind of the hairs in the back of our neck stand up. So that's usually a real, almost in the first millisecond. Like we don't consciously necessarily pass that one. The second one is, are you a winner or a loser? So, and I know. And whenever I say that one, people are always like, ugh.
But that's how we think.
Yes, that is how we think. And the reason why I wanted to be real honest with this, and I say it just like that, are you a winner or a loser, is because we like winners. As humans, we like being around the cool kids. Like we cannot help it. That's why you walked into a new school when you're a kid, and you could always tell immediately who the popular kids were. You just knew, right? And a lot of that has to do with nonverbal, especially in those first few seconds. And so very specifically, we're looking at pride versus defeat body language. So pride body language is when we take up more space. Usually the biggest difference in pride body language is actually not hands on hip. It's not even legs. It's actually the distance between your earlobe and your shoulder. Yeah. And the reason for this, it's a very weird measurement. The reason for this is because if I'm anxious, I end up turtling my neck down. I put my shoulders towards my ears. Like you always see students who are like really anxious. They put their notebooks in front of their chest, like I hold my book and it's like, right. So it's a sign of anxiety. So the best thing you can actually do is think about putting your shoulders really down and back and having your head held high. That is an indicator of confidence, and we like it. It's easy. Oh, and the last one.
I never heard that one. I never heard about this distance. I've heard about like expanding and all
yes.
that. And yeah, so that's really good. Can you talk about the hands? Because that was another good one. And
yeah.
I adjust my camera to do it, but it's not like I haven't quite worked out the space. But
actually with your camera, so you have, luckily we can see like a little bit more of your body too, but you could also try, when you lean back, I can see more of you. So anyway, so the reason I was talking to Stella about the camera angles is because in the book, I talk about the importance of hands. So part of the trust indicator that happens when we're trying to pass these levels is there a threat? So what do police officers say to someone when they arrest them? Get your hands up, right? And that's because our hands show intention. We're carrying a weapon, if we're going to reach out and punch someone in the face, if we're going to reach out and handshake someone. So they indicate a lot for our relationship with someone. And so when we can't see someone's hands, like if I were to do this whole interview when you never see my hands, your trust in me would be a lot less, just from an instinctual level, because you wouldn't be able to see my intention.
Yes. I need to find a way that you guys can see my hands more.
Well, I don't know if you noticed, Stella, so like when you introduced me, like I was like, hello, like I'll put my hand on my face. Like I will try to demonstrate a little higher. Like maybe normally I would be down here, but I try to demonstrate higher for you.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, you guys, I'm going to try to hold my hands up more for future reference. Say the third kind of.
Yeah. So the third level is, are you an ally or enemy? And this is really the final one. It usually happens when we have started speaking. And this is, are you going to be on my team? So this is like, this is the moment when someone's like, I really like you. Like, I get you. You know that moment you have with someone? Like, I think, Stella, you and I had it right when I met you. Like, I knew we would get along. Totally. Yeah. And so it's that moment, or the opposite, when you meet someone, you're like, I don't know about this person. Yeah. And so that kind of congeniality is really important. So in a first impression, typically, if I'm meeting someone for the first time or I'm seeing someone again, I actually try to greet them like an old friend. And that sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually a really important mentality, where if you're meeting someone for the first time, you're more stiff. You're kind of like you're like judging, like, what should we handshake? Should we hug? You can be in more anger, facial expression, right? So I try to think of people, especially if I've emailed them with them before, I'm like, okay, like we're old acquaintances, like we're old friends. And I had to think about when I'm greeting them. I noticed my facial expressions are warmer. My hugs or my handshake is a lot warmer. My expressiveness, my vocal power is less like, hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Which is like terrible. And it's more like, hey, good to see you.
Yeah.
It's very, very different vocally.
Love that. So act as if you're old friends.
That's right. Yeah. And by the way, I don't want that to be like faking it till you make it. I want it to be thinking about your previous experiences with the person, emailing with them. Maybe you read their website and really connected with it. That's kind of an old friend in its own way. Yeah. So doing your pre-research, looking at their LinkedIn profile, emailing, those are all reasons that you're already friends, right? They're not strangers.
Yes. Yes. I love that. That makes it more of an authentic
mm-hmm.
So last question for you, because
yes.
We have a lot of leaders from, executives to first-time managers, and I get them at all levels, this question, which is, how do I engage my team? Mm-hmm. And I loved the tips that you gave in your book around engage and how to engage and empower. So let's end on that high note. What tips do you have for that?
So I gave a couple really specific ones in the book, but one I'm actually going to highlight is chapter 7, which is on the personality. So, I'm a manager. We have a team of 5 at Science People. We're not huge, but we do have a team, and we have 112 trainers in countries around the world who are Science People trainers. And it's a lot of people. It's managing a lot of different people. And so the biggest thing I've learned is understanding how my personality connects with other people and how their personality connects with mine. So I think the best thing you can do is learn each person on your team, or at least people you work closely with, learn their big 5. So every person, this is, by the way, the only personality science that's based in actual science. Myers-Briggs is not, Enneagram is not, DISC is not. This is the only one. So the big 5 are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and eroticism. Remember them by Ocean. And I have a free quiz on our website that will help you diagnose your personality. Okay. I highly recommend it. And this can be kind of a fun final challenge. Is 1, take the quiz yourself, see how you rank. 2, have someone on your team take the quiz as you.
Ooh, I like that.
It's a terrifying and wonderful experience. Where you will actually begin to have a completely different kind of conversation with how you connect with people. That one tool, which is a free tool that's given out by academic universities, has fundamentally changed my team. And it's the start, I think, of creating more cohesion amongst the people you work with. So I'm sure we can link to it. It's sciencepeople.com/personality. It's up there for free. It'll be up there for free forever.
Perfect. I love that. And I think that's a great exercise. I actually love I'll take this and then you take it as me, and kind of doing that with your team. That would be such a great one-on-one.
Yes.
Or how can we create agreements about how to better work together? And I love that. I love that. Well, this has been we got to do this more often. We can't wait.
I know.
But this has been so good. I always learn so much. And by the way, I read Vanessa's book in practically one sitting. It was literally so captivating. And I never do that. So it was so juicy. And I already started using it with my clients and referencing research. And I was like, yes, this is the Franklin effect. So so you guys will learn what that is when you read it. But I highly recommend this. I think it's so valuable. It really helps you connect more deeply, be more of who you are in this world in a more confident way. And it's also just great, cocktail party conversation. So on all levels, Vanessa can help you be a better human. And thank you so much. This was so fun.
Yes. Thank you so much for doing what you do and putting such good content out there. And I'm so appreciative of the support of the book. And I hope everyone who's listening joins the family. It's been great just chatting. And let me know if you have any other questions.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Vanessa.
Yay.